my last videos was simple little people for street scenes and watercolor paintings where they're distant, so there's not much detail on those people. So I thought it was timely to think about people if they're larger and more in focus and you want to suggest a face. So I've just pulled up a busy street scene from Google, and we're just going to look at these couple of men here and some really simple techniques to suggest a little bit more detail in your faces without feeling the stress of having to draw a face. So these are really simple techniques I'm going to show you today. So we're going to consider this person perhaps to be about this large face-wise. I always start with an oval. I'm going to draw a little bit darker than normal just so that you can see that better. It's difficult in pencil on video. So I start with an oval shape basically for the face to the hairline, from the hairline to the chin. Halfway between the top and the bottom is the eye line. Halfway between that line and the chin I put another little line for the nose, and halfway again. Halfway between the nose and the chin is the lip. So if I'm doing a smallish face in a scene, but I want more detail than this, but it's not a portrait, I'm going to show you how you can suggest it basically with shadow. Because if we look at this, these figures, sorry, it turns on me every time I pick it up. If we look at these figures, these faces, the shadow is generally always in very similar spots. So without actually drawing an eye, drawing a nose, or drawing lips, we're going to create the suggestion of a face using these three lines. So even straight away we get the sense that that's a face. But if we just start to put a little bit of shadow, and I'm using a rough shape of an eye here, in that it's half moonish. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow underneath the nose and a little bit of shadow on the top lip. And then the shadow comes underneath the bottom lip. So if you want to draw lips that have detail and look like this, your person looks much less realistic than if you just have shadow that indicates the top lip, roughly shape, and a shadow that sits underneath the lip, underneath the bottom lip. So we can refine this shape a little bit of the top lip, but we're not drawing lines as such, we're drawing shadows. And the reason that this is nearly always the case is that our top lip angles back. So our top lip, if we're looking side on, angles back towards, this is say the profile, the opening of your mouth here. This is the top of your top lip. So it angles back and our bottom lip angles forward. So when we look at a photo of nearly anybody, even if it's a woman and she has lipstick on, so even a woman with lipstick, you see the top lip is in shadow and the bottom lip is touched by light, and that's because the top lip angles back and the bottom lip protrudes forward. So you can see on both of these men, the lady back here, this man's in profile, there's another man over here. So can you see here we've got the shape of the top lip in shadow, and then we've got a shadow underneath the bottom lip. So I very rarely actually draw the bottom lip at all. I draw the shadow that becomes the chin. The shadow that is just above the chin. And so this is 90% of the amount of detail that I put in, lots of my sketches that I would be doing where I just want to suggest a face. It is as simple as that, and your eyes will read it as a face. If I then want just a touch more detail, I might do this with the eye. Say the face is slightly bigger. I don't draw anything underneath. I never do an eye that looks like this because it doesn't look like an eye. This looks like an eye. We have the crease, we have the pupil, and we have the little bit of the tear duct. So after I've done these little bit of shadow, I might just refine that if I want a little bit more detail on this person, and then perhaps the suggestion of the eyebrow. I don't like to run shadow all the way up either side of the nose. Sometimes I'll put it on one side, but usually if I do, it's in the form of shadow like this rather than a line. And so I might just refine those lips a little bit. And another thing to really keep in mind when you're drawing these faces is this little point where your lips come together at the outer corner. So if we look back to our picture, this point here and here on this man, that is nearly one of the darkest points on the face. So nearly as dark as what you would do the eyes, I will do that little corner of the mouth. And so once we've got that amount of detail, we have to add space for the top of the head or the hair. This isn't the size of the head, so usually, like if it's a lady, you know, she might have hair, but I'll come up a little bit, add space for the top of the hair. So that first circle, the first oval, is basically the face to the hairline. So then I'll capture that. If I'm suggesting ears, ears generally start lined up with the bottom of the nose, and they come up to the eyebrow line, but usually there's hair covering them unless it's a man. In general, ladies will have a little bit of a do. She might have a bun coming out here. Just depends, or you know, they might have a hat on. Whatever style you're doing there, I just suggest a little bit of a upside down U as the suggestion of the ear. And so just to refine these features a little bit more, I'll just zoom out so you can practice yourself a little bit. So if I'm looking at line rather than shadow, I'll think of the eye as coming up and then more across and down. Again, I don't do the underneath. I'll put a little suggestion of the crease line in, and perhaps a little bit of shadow in the iris. The eyebrow comes across and then down. And when it comes to nose, when I started drawing noses, I learned a really simplified technique, which was 3 balls. So once you've got your three little balls softly drawn in, you can think of the nostrils as coming in underneath. And can you see straight away we've got the suggestion of the nose? We can soften these lines up if we want to, but usually I'll leave my construction lines. But as your skill develops more, you still can think of it as the 3 balls. Then you might have your nostril, and you start to pay a little bit more attention. And what happens in a nose is this part of the nostril doesn't actually join on like I've got it here. It comes under. So then as I start to get more detailed and lifelike in a portrait, I would bring that down and disconnect the nostril from the side of the ball. And then if I'm thinking about shadow on nearly every person's nose that I've ever looked at to draw, the shadow falls on the underside of the nose. So to form a nose really easily, I then put shadow across the bottom of this middle ball, but I take it up one side a little bit. So I'm rounding that out and it gets darker. Some people, this will be, I think the septum will come a little bit lower. And if I was seeing right up. I've got another nose in the way here, but sometimes I'll take that shadow further up like I have here, up one side and around the side of the eye. But then what I'll do is just keep darkening in underneath, because it needs graduation in the depth of the shadow. And so you might put a little bit, you've then got a little, I've forgotten the name of the little shadowy bit on the inside of the top lip, above your lip. But then, so once you've got that shadow, this nostril needs to come a little bit darker still. And so here you can see this, the two balls there at the top aren't very natural. So if I'm looking at a photo, I would often then just see a little triangle of shadow that would come in here. And so this is if you're getting into more detailed, like larger faces. This amount of detail works for faces. The kind of size that I've just done in my sketchbooks, if I can find one, just these kind of people, you can see that I've started it just exactly how I've just explained. You know, mostly you can see there's a little line there that is the circle of the ball of her nose, the two nostrils coming around. So this lady up here, exactly the same. She's very sketchy, but from a distance, she's got the perception of her face having detail. And you can see I've put the top lip and I've put the shadow under the bottom lip, but there's actually no lines, there's nothing at all that defines the bottom lip. And if you look closely, like at this eye, it doesn't even look like an eye, but from a distance you get the perception that I've drawn a face. And one really easy way, if you've got somebody in your painting from a distance, is just to think about or look at where on the photo the shadow shapes fall. So the eye sockets are always in shadow. We could have shadow down one side of the nose, across the bottom. If we put shadow across the top lip, under the bottom lip, and generally it will curve around to the chin. And so we could have this whole side of somebody's face in shadow if we were painting them. And the same with the forehead. Generally, like the chin, the shadow will curve because the forehead has a little bit of roundness to it. And so you can see straight away with just those shadow shapes, we've got a face. So if these are small people in the distance in your scene, you only need to learn that shape that the shadow forms to straight away have the perception of a person in your scene. So I'm just strengthening up then a couple of little bits around the nose so that my shadow isn't all one tone. But hopefully you can see then how simple adding people into your scene becomes. Obviously the neck would be in shadow, there might be the little ear here.